Your job as a real estate agent should be simple. Point at hardwood floors, talk about school districts, and pretend every damp basement is full of potential. But in Hawkins, Indiana, a house with 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a wall that occasionally breathes presents a unique marketing challenge. The seller calls it character. A rational buyer calls it a deal breaker. This kitchen with bright yellow 1970s cabinets is a masterpiece of distraction. Good lighting and fresh paint mask the smell that hits you at the front door. It is cold and metallic, like a basement that learned how to breathe. When selling a home here, you quickly run into the disclosure paradox. You legally have to mention minor water intrusion and previous electrical issues, but there is no box on the standard forms for organic wall movement, interdimensional seepage, or one highly suspicious government inspection in 1984. So you take photos from angles that avoid the basement and make your first moral compromise of the morning. This standard suburban house represents the quiet, family-friendly facade that real estate depends on. But in Hawkins, you have to develop a coded vocabulary to describe these neighborhoods. Historic district means the dirt is old enough to contain secrets, and a quiet wooded area is a polite way to describe a monster corridor. By the time you host an open house, the space smells like cinnamon, carpet cleaner, and faint electrical panic. You hide cracks behind tasteful plants and pray no one opens the basement door. When the living room Christmas lights begin blinking in a patterned sequence in the middle of May, your survival instinct forces you to smile and call it retro staging. You learn very quickly to lower your expectations. A successful showing in this town isn't one where you get a full price offer. It is simply one where the property doesn't try to consume the buyer before you can hand out the brochures. Eventually, someone will want to see the basement. This is unfair because basements in Hawkins are where reality gets lazy. They contain exposed pipes, bare swinging bulbs, and what we call portal adjacency. And yet, when the walls pulse and the air fills with spores, you discover the true horror of the market. A buyer will ignore active supernatural corruption if they think they can negotiate a $10,000 discount. Next comes the home inspection. Inspectors usually look for bad wiring or a leaky roof, but a Hawkins inspector will emerge from a crawlspace pale and shaking because he has discovered a structural anomaly. The space beneath the house is somehow physically larger on the inside than the outside. That is not a category on any standard inspection report. This orange 1985 walkie-talkie is the specific artifact inspectors find embedded in the walls, usually next to nests made of insulation and animal bones. Hearing scratches from the exterior brick, they simply write, "Recommend specialist evaluation," and leave without collecting payment. This group of suited government officials represents a private research foundation. They do not care about the roof or the kitchen square footage. They evaluate properties based entirely on odd electromagnetic readings and whether previous owners reported dreams of red lightning and falling ash. They always pay in cash and they always close fast. But after the showing, they hand you a non-disclosure agreement thicker than a standard mortgage packet. It is a legal document forcing you to declare that you did not observe things you absolutely just observed. Signing that document is the only way to continue selling homes. In Hawkins, an NDA functions as a hostage note on official letterhead. Institutional denial proves stronger than any monster in the woods, provided the paperwork is signed in triplicate. If a normal family is buying the house, you have to deal with the appraiser. They rely on comparable sales to calculate value, but mathematical models fail when pricing a home with new gutters, an updated bathroom, and a recurring shadow figure in the laundry room. They compromise with sanity by crossing out interdimensional breach and writing unknown environmental concern. Buyers, however, are ruthless. Nothing stops someone who believes a house is overpriced. When a power surge causes the microwave to count backward and the television displays a hallway that doesn't exist, the buyer doesn't run.
They use the hazard as leverage to demand $25,000 under asking, a home warranty, and the removal of the weird vines in the garage. Parents always ask about the schools. This high school basketball game is the perfect marketing distraction. You talk up the sports teams and the band because you cannot mention that the science club kids possess suspiciously advanced emergency response instincts or that the student body is heavily trained in monster evasion. These local children on bicycles function as an informal early warning system. Hawkins children don't look at a basement and imagine a playroom. They look at the laundry door and evaluate the space like a bunker, asking if there is salt, batteries, and a secondary exit. When a 10-year-old asks if the property is inside the safe radius, you dodge the question. But the truth is, childhood here is not an amenity. For a buyer with a family, that unspoken safe radius is the only metric that truly dictates property value. Securing financing requires jumping through the final, impossible hoops of underwriting. Banks hate mystery. They want standard hazard reports, not photographs of slime behind the drywall. You spend days shopping for title insurance because every major carrier refuses to cover acts of unknown biological origin, leaving you with exclusions for subterranean phenomena and dimensional instability. This tree line represents the privacy and shade buyers think they want, but if you listen closely, the birds stop singing, and the woods emit a sound like a wet animal dragging heavy furniture. You have to clarify that the property line ends right before the trees, knowing full well that a secluded yard is exactly the kind of feature that gets a teenager turned into a missing poster. This brings us to the sellers themselves. The phrasing motivated seller usually implies a desire for a quick close or flexible terms. In reality, it means the family is terrified. They turn all the framed photos in the closet around so they don't have to look at them, and they desperately lie about the unexplained noises because they are trapped. These sellers are hostages to their own property. They attribute water intrusion and electrical surges to standard aging, while the entire family sleeps on the living room floor, refusing to enter a bedroom after sunset. As an agent, you understand exactly what is happening. A normal real estate transaction transfers a deed from one party to another. But in Hawkins, you are facilitating the transfer of fear, passing a literal curse to a new, unsuspecting victim. The final walkthrough should be a boring checklist of repairs. Instead, you unlock the front door to find the house freezing and the lights pulsing in rhythm. The walls darken. The hallway physically stretches out in front of you, and the basement door slams open as something heavy and fast starts climbing the stairs. Everyone bolts for the driveway. As the house behind you flickers between normal vinyl siding and wet black vines, the gasping buyer turns to you. They don't ask what just happened. They ask if they can still get their earnest money back. Because even during a supernatural pursuit, real estate never stops. After every disaster, the town relies on market amnesia. A street is blocked off, a lab incident is rebranded as a gas leak, and a house with claw marks in the crawlspace is simply repainted and listed as charming. The market hates memory, so you learn to blame the weather, the animals, and bad wiring to keep escrow moving. At the closing table, the sellers sit with their luggage already packed in the trunk. The pale buyers sign the environmental uncertainty addendums. The keys are passed across the beige table. Outside, the sky is clear, and the town looks innocent enough to fool anyone. Later that night, your phone buzzes at 2 a.m. The new homeowner wants to know why the Christmas lights are spelling out the word run, and if the basement is supposed to have wind. You close your laptop. The transaction is complete. You do not reply. This flowchart illustrates the property life cycle of Hawkins. A home is listed, investigated, sold, and eventually evacuated, starting the loop all over again. Tomorrow, your phone will ring with a new motivated seller. The only honest rule in this market is that every home has risks, and the basement is always lying.